Hardcore Lies.
Hey guys, here we are again, episode 2. I'm not even sure what we're going to call this yet, except maybe a collaboration series within Body Bags. And so, of course, the first one was talking a little bit of John Carpenter, me and Lonnie here, aka Taryn Tats. And but tonight, Glenn comes in with us. We're going to talk a little Fulci tonight. The Godfather of Gore, the poet of the macabre. He's got a few nice little names there. But our top 5. Talk a little bit about Lucio Fulci and how we first came into him and how he's influenced or had an impact on us in our life, and go through a top 5. And I feel pretty good that I'm excited because I think I hope we're all sort of approaching this top 5 a little differently, maybe. And I guess we can, but I remember I asked, so we talked about our call signs, I guess, a little bit last time. And so, Glenn, where does BDG Reviews comes from exactly?
Honestly, I have no idea. I don't know. It's like it doesn't match my initials or anything really, but it's just I was coming up with I was just back in like the forum days, you remember the days where you'd have to sign up, and I'd always just sign up like just hit whatever, and then one time it just came up BDG, and I was like, that kind of works. I've just kind of kept it ever since. So no real deep meaning to it. It's just it's meant many things over many years. What's it been? It's been for a while I had it like this means like bound devil god, and and it was like and then other ones I'm like this means big dick guy, and and all this other stuff. It's just whatever I happen to want it to feel like at the time. That's what I go with.
Well, there you go. From now on, if anybody asks, you just say, "Hey, what's BDG stand for?" Big Dick Glenn.
Solid. Go with that.
Just in case anyone are caught by the name Fulci and haven't seen the first episode, VHS82, just simply my love for VHS, the glory days of renting. 82 is my favorite year for film. And Lonnie, again, Taryn Tats real quick.
Well, it's basically about 2 of my biggest passions in life. One you could definitely see in the background, horror movies, terror, and everything else. And my other passion, which is tattoos.
Oh, yeah.
I got to go down next week. I got a couple I plan to try to get here. So yeah. Right. So, horror movies and, horror stories, tattoos, things like that. That's where that came from. So.
Right. And we are all part of Body Bags, and we've all been part of Body Bags for probably longer than we can even think to remember on how long we've been. We've been quite a while. So, but this is a new opportunity, and probably the last time I'll explain this. But with our new format of 5 Monday through Friday, we thought we'd open up the weekends for opportunity like this, and so this is a new thing for Body Bags, and so maybe it's just the continuation of evolving and becoming something a little bit different but the same, and but hopefully this will keep us rolling. And the archive I keep in letterbox for Body Bags, this coming up next week, we will, and depending on what you do, Glenn, you may be number 3,000.
Well, maybe.
We are one away from Body Bags 9 years in, having 3,000 original reviews, and about, well, if you believe the number that the YouTube channel says, almost a little around 500 repeats. So, and that's, I mean, that's, sometimes those repeats are a little too close to one another, but sometimes it's just bringing stuff up that haven't been done in 8, 5, 6 years or whatever. But 3,000. So I don't know who's gonna it's you or James. It's got to be one of you two. I mean, unless you both just pull something up someone's already done. But Body Bag's been around for I think officially 9 years now, and
I think so, yeah.
And it's been around. So, anyways, Lucio Fulci, the Italian Godfather of Gore. I love Lucio Fulci. But let's go around real quick and just talk our own little personal experiences from. Glenn, why don't you go first?
Okay. The thing with Fulci for me is like when the first Fulci movie I ever saw was Zombie. I think that's probably the case for most people. And what I remember when I first saw it was there was this level of, I want to say like viciousness that wasn't in, like your standard American and like, British type zombie films, Like, yeah, they were eating guts, but they were doing a hell of a lot more too. And there was just this look of that film. And it's just, I don't know what it was, but there was just something that caught, just like grabbed my attention. And I'm like, I don't know what it is. To this day, I can't tell you what it is. But it's one of the reasons why whenever you watch a Fulci film, you can always recognize a Fulci film. I don't know what it is, but there's some thing there, and it's a hook that you don't see coming, but gets into you. And let's just say I'm glad it exists.
Monty?
Well, I talked about this a while back when I did my review for City of the Living Dead on my channel when I reviewed the 4K, and I admit, like when I was young, and I admit I was a bit of a snob, and my mother, she would go, and because I love like George Romero movies and stuff, especially like the Dead films and everything, like I could sit there and watch, Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead. I could watch those over and over and over again. So she would go to the video store and she would rent, stuff like House by the Cemetery or, City of the Living Dead at the time, it was called Gates of Hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so she would rent that stuff because she figured I'd be into it and everything. And I admit, like, I was an idiot. I was a snob. And I was just kind of like, it's a zombie movie. George isn't doing it. I don't care, and stuff. So I admit, even when I was the first time I was getting ready to watch Return of the Living Dead, I was just like, it's not George, and stuff. But finally, I got my head out of my butt. We sat and watched Return of the Living Dead all together, and we all admit this movie is amazing. And then it got me started thinking, it's like, you know what? Maybe you might want to try to get some of these other movies a chance, And so as time would go on, get like some of those like $5, like DVD collections and stuff like that. I was like, I never watched House. We rented it, but I never really watched it. I need to check that out. So I started watching. It's like, wow, this movie. Okay, it's not a perfect movie, but you know what? It's still pretty damn good. It's got. Of course, we all know the bane of the world's existence, Bob. But that aside, but and then I remember as a kid, like we had Gates of Hell on TV, and I wasn't really paying attention to it, but I did see the part where Giovanni Lombardo Radici gets the drill in his head. I was like, oh, okay, wow, that's interesting. I saw that part, but just and just over time, I finally started like giving them chance, and I was just like really like I wanted to hit myself because I was like I could have been enjoying these movies a lot longer, And then when I finally saw Zombie for the first time, it's like this movie is awesome. This movie is so good. It's like God, I am so cool, It's like, and it's like better late than never, but I admit it. When I was a kid, I was a dumbass, but it was like, I started what is like now I'm going into these. I'm getting, like Fulci movies, and it's like, okay, yeah, I hear Dario Argento is great, so I want to start looking at his movies and stuff like this. And I do have to admit though, Bava, I'm kind of like, but like Fulci and Argento and Bruno Mattei, and it's like I've very much come to love them. It just, yeah, unfortunately, it took me a while to get around to it.
Well, I think my earliest experience was audibly, actually, because I would listen to the radio all the time as a kid. I mean, that's what we did. We'd listen to the radio mostly, and classic rock, whatever. And of course, radio spots were big.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
even know if they still are or not, but I mean, when I was a kid, I mean, and so like, I think the Gates of Hell was running, was enjoying its drive-in circuit, going around, and it must have been pretty close to us. And they played the radio spot for the Gates of Hell, as it was marketed here under, and I was so captured by just my imagination listening to that radio spot. I don't know if I've ever really heard, anything like that. That just like, what is this? Like, what, like, and of course, it always ended off with something like "no one under 21 admitted," or whatever, something like that. Because I think it had an X rating or something like that. But
Yep.
yeah, you skip a little bit, until the video stores start popping up, and there was this one particular video store that I used to go into, and they had in the back of their store they had sort of like a makeshift castle look, where you could actually walk up a few steps, and they had just multiple shelving units just filled, but they had one shelf that was filled with foreign horror, even before I think foreign horror was even popular or anything. But a lot of the films on there were Italian, and so I started Fangoria. I mean, you didn't get a lot of foreign stuff. I mean, usually if you got an article on something, it was like, hey, we're gonna finally get this, and it's gonna be all freaking cut up and everything, and we're not gonna get the real kind of thing. But so I mean, I was sort of there, but in the video stores, I started, I think actually Dario's Suspire, I think, was the first thing I ever brought home. Maybe that was Italian. But then, I quickly, I think it was, I want to say the very first Lucio Fulci movie I ever brought home on video cassette might have been The Gates of Hell or Zombie. It was one, or it could have been House. I mean, it could have been any one of those. But you're right. It was something different, man. It was something tonally, aesthetically. It was just Italian film in general. But Fulci in that grouping was different, and they all were sort of kind of different. But I mean, he really was different.
Yeah.
And I didn't understand exactly what was, like what was really different about him. So I like, so radio spots, because it was playing at the drive-in that I didn't actually get to see, unfortunately. Although I did get to see a little bit because my parents went to we always went to the drive-in and stuff. But of course, any adult movie coming on, they did their best to get us to, crash in the back. But yeah, then House by the Cemetery, I'm sure I saw pretty young, because that and Ghost House, because I often got those two confused with one another. I couldn't, remember, which seems blasphemous now, but I mean, I couldn't remember which was which sometimes.
That's the same house, right?
Yeah, and that's probably part of it. But then I went into the Army. I went on a weird sabbatical from horror. I didn't really consume much except for the X-Files, and then as with my collecting, when I first fell into the 22 Shots of Moods and Horror, Moods' own shelf by shelf, I started to remember Fulci. I started to remember a lot of this Italian stuff, and that sort of fueled me to sort of reinvest myself. And along that very short journey, my love for Lucio Fulci is just, I mean, it's just expanded. I mean, quicker than the Blob. I mean, gross. It just is expanding, to the point where, terms of my favorite directors, it's a bit of a struggle between John Carpenter and Lucio Fulci.
Mm.
I probably got more John as a kid, but later in life, Fulci has really set in, in a really, really strong way. So, yeah, Radio Spots was the first hook. So I had to think about it. I had to imagine what I was hearing.
Oh,
And it was terrifying. What I conjured up, and first time I saw him as a kid, it was terrifying. But just imagining what is this? That was so. Yeah. Anything else? I mean, we want to talk about Fulci. Like, okay, so I asked the question. I don't think neither of you have seen any Fulci on the big screen.
No.
All right.
Unfortunately.
So I saw the three I shared with you guys: the Cat in the Brain, The Beyond, and Zombie. That was Sam's first time seeing Zombie.
Oh,
was on the big screen.
That's awesome.
Because up to that point, he would ask every once in a while, and I'm like, nah, not yet. And then there came that chance to go see it on the big screen. I'm like, do I take him with me? I'm like, he will never get this chance ever again. I'm like, yeah. So that was his first. Can you believe that? First time seeing that movie was on a big freaking screen. That was amazing.
First introduction to Fulci's Zombie, you get to watch a zombie attack a shark on the big screen. Oh, yeah. That's like life changing right there.
Yeah. So what edges which one out more, Fulci's Zombie or Romero's Dawn?
For me, Dawn.
Yeah.
As much as I love Zombie, it's just Dawn of the Dead. Like, I got the poster right there, so it's just Dawn of the Dead is just, to me, it's comfort food. I could watch it any time of the day or night. I just love it so much, and I don't know. Just to me, it's like Dawn has just emerged as my absolute all-time favorite zombie movie. That being said, I still do love Zombie.
For me, it's like, well, the thing, what makes it difficult for me is actually they're very different movies. And, I watch Dawn of the Dead more, but I don't know. It's like I have a better time watching Zombie. It's weird. You know what? I'm gonna go with Dawn because it's it's a classic. You literally can watch it anytime. I say that, but I could say the same thing about Zombie, honestly. I'm just gonna say it's too close to call for me. They're so on par with each other.
Yeah. Well, I will be the odd man out then. I will say for me, it is tough because like it is. Dawn is comfort food. Dawn is I go a long ways back with Dawn. Of course, my dad taped it off as something on VHS, back when we were just, taping things off. I don't know, maybe it was HBO or something. He taped it off something. But I think for me, the voodoo element and just the nature of the aesthetics of the zombies, I think for me, like if I had to just pick one and run away with it, it'd probably be Zombie. But if I'm just casually watching one just to watch, it's going to be Dawn.
Yeah.
That is, Dawn is Dawn. I mean, probably, well, I think they both enjoy, being argued, each respectively has their own little place as far as being the best. I don't think there's anything outside of those two movies that has that pedestal.
Not really.
Not really. No. So, all right. Anything else we want to say real quick, or just get into it and talk our way through the five?
Let's go ahead and do it, I guess.
All right. So, who wants to go first?
Why don't we let Glenn go first since he's new to us?
Okay.
All right,
So we're gonna do like the full, like my full five, or just
no, we'll go. We'll just go. You do five, and Lonnie, and then me, or whatever, five, and then we'll go all the way down.
Okay, so my number five is House by the Cemetery. You know, I've always kind of said with House by the Cemetery, it's a damn good movie, but you know, it always felt to me like it shouldn't have been part of that trilogy. You know, City, The Beyond, House by the Cemetery. It always felt like the odd one out. I I don't know. So as a result, you know, it always felt like the lesser title, if you will. And thing is, though, it's still a damn good movie.
Yeah.
You know, hell, I have my like a 20 like no like $50 like a crackhead Bob pin stuck on my wall over there. You know, limited edition pin. You know, there's something about it. It's just a little. Let's put it this way: every Fulci movie has that bit of like oddity to it. House by the Cemetery is just kind of that little bit more for me. So that's why it's number five. You know, it's I don't know, it's just lacking something that my top four have, if that makes sense.
Anything sort of governing your approach in terms of your five?
Honestly, for me, my five is just literally which I like most.
Okay.
Like so if someone was to take these five movies, put them in front of me and say, okay, watch them one by one, start with your favorite. Mine's just that's the order that I would watch them in.
All right. House by the Cemetery, number five. All right, Lonnie.
Okay. Now, for my number five, the only reason why I put this in number five is because I suspect both of you, if this is going to be in your top five, you're going to rank it a lot higher. So I figured, try to change it up so we're not just everybody's just, picking the same thing, the same number and everything. So my number five is going to be House or City of the Living Dead. I almost said House by the Cemetery. City of the Living Dead. That's going to be my number five. And like this movie, I really do enjoy it, and it is such a good movie, and it is so gorgeous and well made, and just oh man, uh, just like the whole atmosphere of the movie, and just like some of the effects, just especially like the girl like puking up her guts and everything else, and you got young Nicole Suave in here and all this kind of stuff. And it's just crazy. Like so many elements of her crazy. And one part I think like genuinely scared me when I first watched this was the part where the young boy he comes in and he's talking about like what was it like my sister's in my room or somebody's in my room or whatever it was but they're dead and all this kind of stuff and um just oh hell yeah just and then I think also too like Christopher George's fate at the end of the movie really shocked me. I did not see that coming. When all of a sudden he gets, getting ripped out of his head and all that kind of stuff, and just, yeah, this movie it's a blast and I have a lot of fun. And like I said, like I was a snob when I was a kid, and it's like, man, I really wish I had been more open-minded as a kid. I could have enjoyed this for more years than I actually do, but just Catriona McCall, is like one of the most beautiful women in the world. That definitely helps. But
That's just
and I love the weirdness of it too. It's just like, you kind of wonder like, what the hell, in a fun way. It's weird, but in a fun way, because like at the beginning of the movie when they're doing the seance, and like the detective is investigating it and all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden you see that flame just. What's going on, then of course, obviously, the creme de la creme, Giovanni getting the drill through his head, Bob getting the drill through his head, and everything else, and just there's so much to enjoy about this movie. And then all this, was it the girl talking to the psychiatrist? When I was young, I wanted to marry my father. It's like, okay, whoa. But that's why this is, like I said, this could have ranked higher, but I just went ahead and put this at number 5 because I imagine, if you guys are going to do this one, it's definitely going to rank higher for YouTube. But just oh man, it's just so fun, and it's so out there, and that's why I love this one. So yeah.
Would you say Gino's the drill press sequence might be the most perfectly shot practical effect in the history of
brilliant
cinema?
Yeah,
it's brilliant, and that's in like whenever I review 4Ks on my channel, I always say like practical effects could be made or broken, by 4K transfers. It's like, I got this one, and Rob, you got the Cauldron 4K, and it still looks flawless.
Yeah. Yeah.
It looks absolutely perfect. It holds up from all the way from the 1980. When was this?
80.
Yeah. Like all this time, and that practical effect, it still holds up even in 4K. It looks beautiful. You couldn't tell anything. So it looks good. So yeah. So number 5 will be City of the Living Dead for me.
Nice.
Wow, we're all going to be different here. What's govern your approach on your 5?
Well, I wanted to try. Okay, a lot of it is about the movies, Fulci's movies that to me have the most replay value, but at the same time though, it's like knowing you guys for years, and it's like like I said, trying to like, okay, well, like I said, this one could have ranked higher, but it's like, okay, I have a feeling like Rob would put this higher, or Glenn might, or whatever. So it's like in terms of like rewatchability, and then also too though, like, okay, yeah, these are my 5 go-tos, but like I don't want to just sit here and like try to mimic what you guys are doing. So but it's like, to me, that's kind of the big thing, what has the most replay value and the ones I can sit and watch the most.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's for me, I want anyone who actually sits here and watches R5, I want them to get the biggest slice of Fulci they can get. And so for me, if I only could take 5 to a desert island, and those were my 5 Fulci films, I really would want the broadest slice, or varying pieces of pie that I can get. And so number 5 for me, and a lot of this is because it is the very first Lucio Fulci film I have ever seen on the big screen. And so it was an experience. I mean, I was uncomfortable watching this. And I think this was only like maybe seeing it the second time in my life was on the big screen.
Nice.
And so Cat in the Brain. Yeah, I don't know. There was something about, I was in a theater. It was like a huge, absolutely huge theater. And the screen was just, I mean, so huge. And there was probably like 3 of us in this entire theater. And, and it was an older theater. So, I mean, when it went pitch black, I mean, it really, hardly a running light or anything. I mean, it was, and then you kind of got, what's that Grindhouse, film where they were showing all the old Grindhouse movie, trailers and stuff. There's one I can't think of the name of, but anyways, but yeah, I guess the autobiographical approach of Lucio, just kind of looking back at his life, his own career, and just reflecting, and I love the end of the farewell, as he's on the boat, sailing off, almost kind of like this is, hey, don't take me too serious, this is just me, and I don't know, there's the cover art though. The cover art to this is another reason, because this is one of those VHS covers that as a kid freaked me out. And I don't think I ever rented this as a kid because I think the cover was just freaked me out too much. And I think it was actually known as Nightmare Concert was what it was marketed as. So yeah, this is. Remember, Glenn, me and you had that conversation about how I was taking pictures to
Yeah.
Walmart, blowing them up, and then so I could put my ticket in there.
Oh yeah.
From the Plaza, Atlanta. But this was such a. I don't know, man. That movie just gets in your head, man. And that whole chainsaw sequence and just how he kind of picks and pans his way through some of his movies. It just sort of you revisited them a little bit in that movie. I don't know, but I've always been just. I think if I had to list my my ultimate top poster arts, I think a Cat in the Brain would be with just the cat and the skull and everything would be one of my all-time favorites. I mean, maybe next to the Gates of Hell poster. I mean, there's again how they marketed Fulci, how you saw it on the VHS cover box and all that junk. But yeah, for number 5, Cat in the Brain. And again, if you ever see it in one of your thrift shops on VHS with that old traditional black background cat in the skull, yeah, hook me up because I would love to have that. That would be so. Cat in the Brain. Cat in the Brain.
Nice.
All right, Glenn.
Number 4. It might come as a surprise. I mean, I think a lot of people will have this higher. My number 4 is The Beyond. Now, don't get me wrong. I love The Beyond. To this day, the ending is one of the best endings in cinema. But compared to the other ones on this list, I would watch them before I would watch The Beyond. There's something about watching The Beyond and just noticing the little idiosyncrasies, like the guy like with the gun, he's trying to like put bullets down the down the barrel, and the sign like "Do Not Entry." That's written really big and bold on like the morgue wall. "Do Not Entry." I love it. The use of maggots. Just gotta say, I don't know of any other filmmaker that uses maggots as much as Fulci.
Maybe Argento.
Yeah. Fulci and Argento, between the two of them, I'm surprised there are any maggots left. But there's something about that opening, the opening of The Beyond, just literally like messing the guy up and like covering him in lime and everything, and then like nailing him to a wall. Essentially, it's just creepy, and I love it. But yeah, The Beyond is one I have very fond memories of. Interestingly enough, I never rented it on VHS. My first real viewing of The Beyond was I was at this store. They sold like DVDs, like all new DVDs, whatever. And then this little used section. And in this used section, they had a little thing where it was like movies without the covers. It was just like the disc in like a CD case. And they had one for The Beyond. And I was just like, you know what? I've heard about it, never seen it, take it, and never look back. That's why it's at number 4.
Okay. All right. So my number 4 is this one here. Like, this movie just wows me, and but yeah, I have to go with Don't Torture a Duckling. Right? And just I think because just this movie is so bold. There is just Fulci had some cojones when he made this movie. I mean, like the whole thing, the whole, murdering children, and the idea of a priest, like who is supposed to be God-fearing and loving, and the idea that this priest, sorry if I spoiled the movie for anybody, but the idea of this priest that is going around and murdering children to try to keep them pure and to try to keep them from sin. And just, like, and the idea, like, near the beginning of the movie, you got this young boy, and what was the actress's name? Oh, I don't remember. But, like, when he goes to bring her a drink, and she's, she's like, doing the tanning nude and everything else, and you almost think like, oh my God, is she gonna seduce this young boy, and just like just and just the and then they're trying to find out like who are killing these children and everything, and just like, wow, that's the reason why I picked this one. Just like it's so brave, it's so bold, and just kind of like, it takes guts to make a movie like this. It really does. And
That's
just
true.
and that was one of the things that was great about Fulci, is like, this guy, he did not shy away, and get into that as some of my other choices, but yeah, I'd have to say probably number 4 would have to be Don't Torture a Duckling. Just wow, just amazing. Fulci didn't hold back, and in a Fulci movie, that was one of the things though too that was kind of interesting about his films. Is like, in a Fulci movie, anything could happen to anybody at any time. Nobody was safe.
Definitely.
So that's part of the thing that's great about his movies. Like, man, you go watch his movie, you're gonna be surprised. So
Yeah.
but yeah, so that's my number 4 is Don't Torture a Duckling.
That's the thing about Fulci is Fulci's relationship to the church is really complex. He's not. I don't think anyone would ever dare, really serious person would call him an atheist. But I think his quote was, I should have written down. He had a quote where he said that he admired atheists because they're just choosing not to deal with the issue. But since he sees God in pain and suffering, and so much of his life was carried with pain and suffering and a loss, and his losses and everything that he had to endure, the injury to his daughter and his wife's suicide and everything. Just complex. I mean, the man, a lot of freaking crap up here moving, and a lot of it gets reflected on his film, which is so. It makes sense that some of us just really tap into it, because I think we see a lot of stuff happening underneath. All right, number 4. Number 4. We're all been different. This is great, man. I think what is it, 77? First time I saw this movie, man, I absolutely just fell in love with it. I think this is the best retelling of Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, if you're not going to call it The Black Cat. The end of this movie, man, just had. I can't remember the last time I was on the edge of my freaking seat, just because I knew how it was going to go down, but how it goes down is freaking brilliant. I freaking love this movie so much. The Psychic from 77. Her whole vision of her own death and just following that through to its logical end, not knowing just how close the threat really is to her without trying to get into any real spoilers. This is one where I probably said enough just with the Black Hat, but this is shot so beautifully, and it's got one of the greatest dummy falling down a cliff scenes ever. I mean, in the history of dummies off a cliff. I mean, this is and what really is intriguing about this, on this release, what is it, Scorpion? Yeah. There is a absolutely incredible interview with Dardano Sacchetti. And what's fascinating about this is the moment that Sacchetti and Lucio come together. and apparently, I think it was Dino De Laurentiis was producing.
Nice.
And Fulci and was working with the other Giambetti, something like that, the screenwriter, and they just couldn't get anything. They could not get a script. I can't remember the book's name, but Dino bought the book. They were going to turn the book into the film, which ultimately becomes The Psychic. And so to try to salvage the project, they bring in Sacchetti. And Sacchetti just got off of his relationship, a rocky one, with Argento. He had written the Cat o' Nine Tails for him, and but because he worked with Argento, and since Fulci hated Argento, Fulci hated Sacchetti. And so there, he was the spy for, he was the spy for Argento, and so long story short, Sacchetti said that there came a point where he thought the whole thing was just going to fall. And I think he went out with him, or something. I mean, Fulci was apparently a real womanizer and would go out to the clubs in the evening and ham it up, man, as much as he could. And he had to talk with him. He just said, look, he says, what would you do? What would you do if this was just you? What would you do? And he said, Fulci said, well, it has to do with fate. It has to do with fate. You can't escape fate. I don't believe you can escape your fate. Once you're locked in, you're locked in. And Sacchetti said, if I write a story tonight and prove to you that you can escape your fate, Fulci's like, write it. And so he did, and Fulci bought it. And Fulci said, that's our movie. That's The Psychic. And that started this incredible, very too short-lived relationship between Fulci and Sacchetti, in which Sacchetti says, had they had a producer like, say, Roger Corman, who actually cared about the genre, they said they would have broke the sky wide open. He said there's no telling what him and Fulci would have created together. They would have redefined horror as it was. And the other thing that made this transition effect from The Psychic forward is Fulci was transitioning, putting Edgar Allan Poe away and falling into the arms of H.P. Lovecraft, which explains a lot in the next handful of movies, right? So this is such a transitionary film. For my favorite screenwriter is Sacchetti. I mean, he's worked with all the greats, Bava and all of them. The Psychic, man. The Psychic is it is mandatory Fulci, man, and it's the beginning of a great collaboration between him and Sacchetti, which is awesome. Such an awesome. And I love Sacchetti. I love listening to him talk. I think most of my releases of Fulci films, a few of them, enough of them, have a Sacchetti interview of sorts, and he's just great to listen to. I think he's 79 now, teaching writing in Rome.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
there you go.
He's he next to the Gino and some of the others, he is the maestro of writing. I freaking love Sacchetti. I absolutely love him. But anyways, number 3.
Yeah. Number 3 for me is Don't Torture a Duckling. Honestly, it's one of my favorite giallos. And, I have no problem calling it a giallo. I've heard some people say they don't actually consider it one, but I do, And pretty much a lot of stuff, it's already been mentioned, but, it is a very, it does stuff that you don't do. Like if there was like a giant book of like, do not do this in your movie, Lucio looked at that book, chucked over his shoulder, and just said we'll do everything that this book said not to do. And you gotta love it. You really do. It's I will say this for it. I find it feels somewhat dated because how can I put this without sounding like a jerk? When I watched it, and I saw the priest, my first thought was, it's the priest. And maybe that's just due to the fact that, we hear so much like bad stuff about priests, I sort of called it. So like, I'm assuming they'll maybe like somewhat more innocent time when priests were looked at, not automatically with, he must be like screwing that kid. That's why it's at 3 for me, just that little, but beautiful movie and wonderfully mean-spirited.
Oh, that chain whipping scene.
Ooh.
And the score.
Yeah.
It's the score is
Score's great.
Yeah, and such in a way such a benevolent antagonist. I mean, because he really does believe in what he's doing.
Yeah. And that almost makes it worse.
Well, in a way it's interesting because it comments on both. It comments on his character,
mm-hmm.
but it comments on the society at large and what he's seeing, and
mm-hmm.
and he doesn't want these children to follow a pathway that ultimately leads them to hell. So get them to heaven before they reach that point of I guess accountability, in that way. But at the same time, how could we ever envision a priest doing that? It is really well written. I mean, but that's the thing with Fulci. He wants you to think about something.
Yeah.
Just not, priests are evil, but think about the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's, and that's, it's too bad he went through so much pain. But, I've said it before, I think the greatest album ever is Metallica's Justice for All. And that's all pain and suffering because of the loss of Cliff.
Yeah.
Something about pain when it's released artistically like that conveys stuff that is just mind-boggling.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it last. Right.
Yep. Oh yeah, you could sit there and discuss it for a long time. Talk about that movie for hours.
All right, Lonnie.
All right. So my number 3 is going to be The Beyond, because this movie is so much fun to watch, and this, in my opinion, is easily one of Fulci's most beautifully shot films.
Mm-hmm.
And like his choice of locations, I forget the name of the bridge, but that bridge where
Louisiana.
Driving down, she sees Eliza standing there with the dog and everything else. It's one of the most visually stunning scenes I've ever seen, and and like what Glenn was talking about, wonderfully mean-spirited is the fact that her own eye dog turns on her, rips her throat out and stuff, and I love the ending though too. And the one thing I think is funny is like David Warbeck is like, it's fun because like he's shooting the zombies and all this stuff, and you keep in a fun way. It's like, you dumbass, shoot him in the head, for crying out loud. But it's like he keeps refusing to shoot them in the head and everything. But
and I'm ethically opposed to shooting people in the head, so I won't do it.
So I was like, yeah, wait a minute. I shoot them in the head, they fall down and they stay dead. Well, that's one thing I'm not gonna do. So, and if my mother was still alive, she would have, like, the tarantula scene would have been to her like the most horrible, nightmarish thing ever. Like, so that definitely gets it. The music score, I love the score in this movie. I just love the choice of location that he used for this, and just like, and also too, the idea that the hotel is, like the gateway to hell, and this, like what Glenn said earlier about House by the Cemetery, is you can see this movie connecting with City of the Living Dead, in terms of, like the story logic and things like this. Whereas like House by the Cemetery does feel off. But you could watch this back to back with City of the Living Dead, and you feel like, yes, there is a strong connection to this. But yeah, just man, this movie, it's a blast. It's a lot of fun, and just and then when you hear the stories about it, like you hear about yeah, they needed the kind of like the bodies laying on the ground, and so so Fulci went out and rounded a bunch of drunks and just told them to lay on the ground and everything. Like there's one of the things too that I enjoy about it. It's almost like the making of the movie is almost, if not just a little bit more interesting than the movie itself.
Mm-hmm.
But just yeah, and so yeah, I think I'm pretty much. But just, and the cast is good. David Warbeck, Catriona McCall, and everything else, and just so yeah.
It's great about the Gates of Hell trilogy, or actually, I'm starting to actually prefer the alternative, Fulci's Lovecraft trilogy. You can find these stories in Lovecraft stories. You can see where, because Sacchetti said that Fulci he had fallen so deeply into Lovecraft. He said he just couldn't get enough. He was just eating it up. Just I mean, it was, for him, it was like it was an awakening that didn't sit in him very long before it was reflected on the screen. And I don't think in 3 films in a loosely knit trilogy, and I see where the point is made about whether House fits or not fits, but since, damn it, I need a trilogy. It's my trilogy. It is the Lovecraft trilogy. I think it's the greatest artistically expressed, hey, I get Lovecraft and I'm going to prove it to you, without it being one of those millions of movies that says H.P. Lovecraft, insert title.
Yeah, that's true.
It is the just aesthetically but I remember, what's cool about The Beyond is that's one of those intriguing movies that before Grindhouse put it out, which I love, I have that release. It's such a great release. Before that release, so you really couldn't find it anywhere. And the only place, that I could occasionally, once in a while, I would find a really terrible copy on YouTube. And if I found it on YouTube, I would watch it. And then Grindhouse, of course, came out.
Yeah.
And that's that is, and it looks so beautiful. Grindhouse did such a great job on.
Also, too, we do need to say a little thank you to Quentin Tarantino, because he brought attention to it, and like, hey, here's this movie, and you might want to look at this. This movie's really good, and and because of his recommendation, it started getting people like to start noticing it again. So, but yeah, so a little nod to Quentin Tarantino to help bring attention to this movie. So that definitely helps.
Awesome.
Yeah, The Beyond, that's my number 3.
All right. Well, I am definitely going to be off the beaten path on this one. I've always sort of had a weird relationship with this genre. I've never really got into it, but I've always been intrigued by it. But when I saw this movie, not only did I fall in love with this movie, but I fell in love with it because I could see the beginnings of what was coming down the pike. How it was shot, just the story. I think it's got one of the greatest villains ever. This guy freaking makes me roll every time I watch this movie. He may be the most villainous of all the villains in a movie of this type of genre. And the cemetery scene alone foreshadows so much of what Fulci is going to do in a very short period of time. And y'all know what I'm talking about? Chaco is the villain.
I don't know.
Or the apocalypse.
nice.
These four characters, you had the gambler. To the introduction to all four of these characters, the prostitute, the town drunk, and the madman who sees dead people and talks to the dead people that he sees, just like walking around, like he's just aimlessly talking to these people, like he's really having a conversation. And it's funny, the mayor, I think it's the mayor of the town that when it is a Fabio Testi's character, the gambler, when he first comes in, the he's quickly arrested, thrown in the jail where the others are, and there is this freaking purge, and they literally are just wiping out crime in one night. But for some odd reason, these four are allowed to go. And so it becomes a journey for these four, and they're really whacked out characters. And then Chaco comes in, and but you got some set, and the scope is so wide, and there's this cemetery scene where the atmosphere. This guy's just out there talking to dead people and stuff, and you got this mining town, I think, up in the mountains they end up at. And it's just like this long journey. But you can see the beginnings of what is starting to swirl up here in his mind. He's starting to lay certain things out that we'll see with much fuller expression in terms of the moment he really wakes up and realizes, I can do this. I can do horror, and I can do it freaking better than anyone. Which I think his main rival was always Argento. I think he was upset because Argento was that new kid on the block who just showed up, made the big splash, and then suddenly had all the attention, all the money, and all the Fulci had been at it for since the 50s, in film, which I always forget. He started off as a film critic.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then broke into film, and just on the way up, the journey is amazing. But For the Apocalypse, man, if that ever got a 4K, I would hit that. I don't know if it has. So, Lon, you have to keep your ears if you ever hear that.
If I hear anything, I'll let you know.
But yeah, and I know Fulci's got two other westerns, but I've never seen them. I think there's Massacre Time and Silver Saddle, but I've never seen those two. But I absolutely freaking love For the Apocalypse. Absolutely love that movie.
Nice.
Now, number two.
My number two is Zombie.
Oh,
I mean, it's such a good movie.
Oh man.
And there's such a level of, you can tell when you watch this movie that you're in the hands of a master. That he gets, the gore, he gets the horror, he gets what would make that situation scary. Something I've noticed in a lot of horror movies is, like, you'll have like a zombie apocalypse, for example, and people won't really, they don't really put across what would really make that scary. Because, I mean, let's be 100% honest, dead things trying to eat you, yeah, sure, it's sort of scary, but I mean, when all's said and done, you can run, you can shoot, fight back, or whatever. What makes zombie films scary is just the idea of the dead rising. And honestly, I don't think I've ever seen it done better than in Zombie. The maggot eye zombie alone, just raising out of the grave sort of thing. I'm trying to think if I've ever seen it done better, and I can't think of anything. He gets it. like you said, Rob, about also like the voodoo type aspect is something that I would like to see more of in zombie fiction. You know, it's we don't get enough of it, and as a result, we end up like it's always it's a virus. Oh, it's like something from space. But voodoo. You bring voodoo into the equation, that opens up a whole other option. Like, this isn't a virus. This is like almost like a spiritual type thing. And it opens up so much. And honestly, any movie that has like a zombie fighting a shark is always going to get a thumbs up from me. And any movie that has a girl who decides to go scuba diving with no shirt on gets a thumbs up from me. I have no problem with that at all. I'm all for it. So yeah, my number 2 is zombie.
Sorry, we're gonna have to agree on this one because zombie. That's gonna be my number 2 as well. So sorry, Rob. I know the idea is try to make it different, but this is the one time. But no, but just for a lot of the same reasons that Glenn said, just everything about this movie is it is so much. Like I said, Dawn of the Dead is pretty much my go-to, but Zombie, I still love this movie with a passion. Everything about this movie works. The soundtrack is amazing. The score is brilliant. Fabio Frizzi, I love his score on here. And that was the thing. It was like I think you guys remember I told you like I did a really stupid thing, several years ago when this came out on 4K. I had this edition and I sold it off, and then I regretted it ever since because this has the CD soundtrack. And so I was wondering, is like, could I ever get it back? And I finally did, and I came across it in my local record store, and I was like, I got to have this back. So I rebought this just so I could get that soundtrack back. So the soundtrack is amazing. You got Richard Johnson as the lead. I like Richard Johnson. I like him in pretty much everything I've ever seen him in. I like him in this. I like him in The Haunting. Just about every, Beyond the Door. Just about I've always liked him as an actor. Of course, like the zombie fighting a shark scene is amazing. This too, the cinematography is gorgeous. Like I said, I went and rebought this, but I know you might not think like this movie could look amazing in 4K. It really does. You will be surprised if you ever come across it in 4K. Give it a shot. Yeah, you're going to be surprised. It's like it actually can look better than this. It's like not by much, but it does look a little bit better. But just I love the island thing. Like the real like closed off. That they're and just some of the I love like the effects are amazing. Like you got the one zombie where like her eye is like turned that way. Oh
yeah.
And the church setting and everything else, and
the little crab just walking on the sandy ground. I mean, just how they took the time to capture that.
And then of course you got is the zombie here. Of course you gotta love that zombie there.
Oh yeah.
That's ever and just and and then of course one of the best effect scenes too is the pulling her, and then the splinter going in the eye.
Oh yeah.
And one thing I love too, though, as a matter of fact, that's the zombie right there I was talking about. Those are two. I love the sound effects on this too. I love that they really put like more like the part where they go to check on his wife and she's dead, and the zombies are eating her, and all this stuff. And they put in all the squishy, nasty sound effects. They reach in to grab so you hear, and just so this movie it's such a boatload of fun, and just everything about it works. And of course, the most iconic shot at the end there, going across So yeah, yeah, I agree with Glenn. So yeah, zombie is going to be my number 2.
You know, we tried so hard to make this different, and yet number 2 is the one we've all met each other on the same ground. That number 2, zombie.
Zombie.
Um, God, I love the opening. I love the idea when that threat comes in from seemingly somewhere different, and that and they find the boat just sort of sitting there in the harbor, and the police get on there for the first time, and they find that mess down down in the quarters, whatever, and you got that big hulking freaking big zombie man and it's just the ferociousness of this movie. It is scary. This might be one of the scariest, if not the scariest, at least arguably, in a debate of being the scariest zombie movie ever made. I think some of it has to do with the score, the sound effects, the, the willingness to take its time
Mm.
and make you suffer. How many times do we see movies? They'll go. You think they're going to go, and then boom, they pull back.
Oh yeah.
And this is one of those rare exceptions when he just says, no pulling back. I am going to take you right through it, the whole thing. And it's not even just the infamous eyeball piercing, which is one of the most incredibly visually shot moments. But it's one of the rare. How is this one of the rare zombie movies where we get to indulge ourselves in watching zombies literally coming up out of the earth?
Exactly.
I mean, and you would think this would just be a common cliche thing, but it's not. It's like you rarely ever see zombies, just when they're in that little area where the old conquistadors are, and you have the infamous I'm trying to think of his name, the guy who plays him. When I'm reviewing this freaking movie, I got his name right in my head, but Aqua. What the heck? Where I don't see it on the box, but yeah, just it's got everything. It's got the ferocious enough of things that are happening in the moment, but then with Dr. Menard's wife, when we see the after effect, and those zombies are just that scene is so ghoulish. And it's not 4K, but it's the remastered 4K restoration, and this movie looks beautiful just like this. I can't imagine seeing it just one tiny step up more with 4K, an actual 4K. The Bridgehead scene in the end, and it's so unfortunate that this gets lumped in with Dawn so much, because this is perfect just marketing that is outside of Fulci's control, Dario's control. It's outside of all that junk. This is just, how are we gonna market a movie to audiences? Well, let's just ride the coattails of one that's been marketed as Zombie, so we'll have Zombie 2 and follow along. But it's the voodoo aspect. There's mystery. And I love Romero's movie. I mean, because it's comfort food, but it's commercialism run amok. It's a great metaphor for a lot of things that he wants us to think on, and it's a great adventure story. I mean, Dawn is an adventure story. This is an adventure one too, but it's more. I think what makes it terrifying is just the mystery of the supernatural component of it, and the fact that they were trying to tap into the Val Lewton movies of the old days. I Walked with a Zombie, or whatever that was, or I think one of the greatest missteps, maybe potentially, was DeAngelis not immediately following this up with a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and instead, I think he got another director, and they did Zombie Holocaust.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, maybe we would have never got the Gates of Hell trilogy if it wasn't for that misstep. I don't know. It is, unfortunate that Fulci won't be able to really realize his Zombie 3. I think it was a combination of Fragasso and Matai that finished that movie off for him because he got sick. But yeah, seeing it on the big screen was its own thing, and God, that was so freaking awesome. Yeah, for me, it just some of these elements, and Dr. Menard, Richard Johnson is so freaking great in this freaking movie, and his assistant. I've said this before. If I ever had a crush on someone, it's his assistant. I don't know what it is about her.
She's so cute.
And it's just the mystery of what else is happening on this island that we never get to see, but we hear it in the background. Sometimes we hear these drums, we hear things, that are off in the distance on this, and there's things happening. And I think some of the terror too is reflected like with Menard's wife. She's freaking petrified, man. She wants off this freaking island. And that it sells itself. And you kind of get in, you get into it, and you're just like, and then when you realize freaking these people, man, they're not getting off. They're not going to make it. And that last the Alamo scene, I guess, this freaking, man, I don't know. Zombie is easily one of the greatest, if not the greatest, zombie movies ever. And I love the girl. Last thing I'll say, I guess, I love the girl that when our main cover zombie just comes up and is literally towering over her, and she just literally stares with fright, frozen, fear, can't move. There's something real about that. Like we all joke and say, oh, if that was me, I'd be hightailing it. I'd be, I don't know. I think if we were really in a real situation, I think we would be so scared of our freaking minds. We would just be, we would freeze, I think. Unless we saw the threat from a minor distance. If it was that close to us, that would be freaking terrifying. Yeah, I don't know. We could talk about this movie all night, but freaking, that's awesome. So different, and yet too, we're all. Too bad we can't say that for number one, so that makes it exciting. I'm excited.
Oh yeah. Hopefully we don't all pick the same number one, but there we go.
Well, we haven't picked the same number one. I can tell you that because, my number one's City of the Living Dead.
Okay.
A perfect combination of nightmare logic, Lovecraftian elements, and, a suicidal priest. I mean, how many movies can you honestly say open with like a priest hanging himself? I mean, it's one thing that, how can I put this? When you look at the other parts of the Gates of Hell trilogy, it's always like, the idea that a gate to hell has opened, that's the whole idea. With City of the Living Dead, it makes it plainly obvious, like, this is why this gate has opened. This priest killing himself, was the spark that started the fire, if you will. Yeah. I appreciate that. I appreciate that a lot, actually, because that was kind of the thing, like in like The Beyond. It's something happens way back when, and then something happens now, and it's never really set out as to why this stuff's going on. Where in City, it's obvious it's the damn priest's fault. No, kill yourself somewhere else. You'd have been fine, but no, he had to do it right there over like a hellgate, you know? I love it. Every part of this movie is just a blast.
Yeah.
I can watch City of the Living Dead any day. You know, the drill scene is perfect. I mean, the thing with that, what really gets me is when you watch the drill turning, you know it's like, you know, like one on either side sort of thing. That's how they did the effect. But it's matched up perfectly when the bit's turning, you know? That says something about like the preparation that went into that scene. That they were willing, that they even went so far as like, okay, make sure they turn at the same rate so it looks like it's actually spinning. And honestly, what more can you say? As far as I'm concerned, it's a perfect Fulci film, and it easily took my number one spot.
All right, Lonnie, dazzle us. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this, I think Rob is going to be like, why am I not surprised? But my number one favorite Fulci movie, The New York Ripper.
Oh, yeah.
For those of you watching, if you don't know that, for the longest time, I kept going after Rob over and over. Have you seen New York Ripper? You need to see New York Ripper and all this kind of stuff. It is the sleaziest, most violent movie that Fulci's done and everything else. And this is Fulci like doing his, like you could tell like Fulci was watching 80 slasher movies and basically was like, hold my vino.
Exactly.
And this movie is like, this is easily probably the sleaziest, nastiest, most violent movie I think Fulci's made. And just and the main character, the detective, is such a scuzzy guy, and he's going around, he's sleeping with prostitutes and everything else, and the fact that Fulci did not hold back at all. I mean, this probably has the most explicit nudity out of all of his films. It has like oh my gosh, like if there was ever a time people wanted to call Fulci a misogynist, this movie would probably be it. Because you have this killer who's going around making, what was it, like a Donald Duck noise and all that kind of stuff. And the whole thing is like trying to attack women and stuff, like so much like female genital mutilation and stuff like this, and just so much, just so much nastiness and vileness going on, and like you got the woman who's going out and she's having her little flings or whatever, and she's got to make sure she tape records it so her husband can get off to it and everything. She goes into that pool hall where the guy starts diddling her under the table with his toe and everything else, but it just like probably one of the most nastiest scenes I've seen in a movie is when the poor prostitute character, he's torturing her with the razor blade and like getting her right in the eye with it and everything. Like that scene is unwatchable. And so, but just all of this stuff, just and then you realize, and like Rob or not Rob, but like Jason and Glenn are always talking about like they love the really like bummer, like just downer endings and all this kind of stuff. I mean, at the end of the movie, when the young girl is in the hospital and she doesn't know what happened to her father, realize like she's gonna die alone and her father's not coming back and everything else because her father was the killer and all this other kind of stuff. So yeah, so yeah, for all those reasons, like the the sleaze, the gore, all that kind of stuff. I love slasher movies anyway, and I can't call this a giallo. This really to me feels more like a slasher. So, but yeah, so my number one is probably got to be the New York Ripper.
How did I do with that review? Did I do it justice?
I enjoyed it, but I was just kind of like, I was kind of okay, well, I thought Rob was going to be a little more into this. Like, okay, yeah, I think that movie kind of got to you a little bit, didn't it?
It did a little bit. It did. There was one. I'm trying to think. There's a moment I mentioned. I think it had to do with what's that scene when the girls in that it's almost like a dreamlike sequence. And then it ends up, she comes up from, is it the subway up through, and there's that movie theater. I can't remember what was playing. Was it American Werewolf in London? Maybe something like that. Yeah. There was a few things that I was catching and seeing that I really hadn't heard people talk about before. And with a movie like that, where, the easy things to go to and talk about, there's other things in there working too, that are really interesting. But, some of the, a lot of the scenes, it is sad. It is so sad to think, that he basically just abandons his daughter. And the question too, I think I asked in the review, is what about the mom? Yeah, I don't know if we ever really hear about the mom. It's like she bails first, and then he is so grief-stricken or doesn't know how to process it. And maybe I think that's what I said in my review. I think it was more the violence he was acting out was the hatred for his wife running out. It seemed to me like maybe that's what was working was, we never got anything from it. We never really given anything. We're not spoon fed in that movie. You really had to just think about it subjectively. But that's what I mean. It just seemed like there was a lot more working sort of behind the obvious shock, scenes.
Well, that was a piece of it, but a lot of it had to do with the fact that the guy was going around, he was killing these women mainly because like his daughter was going to die at a young age, and like he hated these women and resented these women because they got to grow up and they got to do things like his daughter will never get to do, and so he had a hatred for them, and he wanted them to pay, he wanted them to suffer because they got to go on and live a life that his daughter will never get to do. And so that ended up being a lot of his motivation behind it.
Yeah. It's funny with a movie that gains so much hatred, there's actually a lot to talk about. That's intriguing, and that's no matter what Fulci does, there's a lot to talk about. So
I think we've established, though, like going through our list here, I think we established there is so much to talk about almost every one of Fulci's movies. There's so much to discuss. There's so much to theorize about. You could go on and on talking about Fulci movies. You really could. You go down a wormhole, you ain't coming out.
It was a little surprise, Lonnie. I thought maybe you were going to come out with the woman in lizard skin.
No.
Oh.
I just figured like
but I'd forgotten about the New York Ripper. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
I was looking through what I had, and then I'm like going through it. It's like, okay, what about this one? What about this one? And it's just like, you know what? I can't deny the fact this one's probably got to be my number one. So I got to go with that one. Okay, Rob, close us out.
Well, all right. This definitely should not be a surprise at all. Glenn's already talked about it a little bit. This is, I think, one of the greatest. This is my number one horror movie of all time. And it resides within, I think, the greatest loosely knit Lovecraftian trilogy that has ever been put to film. And this movie, man, going back to when I was listening to the radio spots, just imagining, to the first time, I'm sure I walked home with it on VHS. The score right at the beginning, it just gets inside of you, and it's uncomfortable, and right from the very beginning of the movie, you're in for something. And this, my love for this movie is such that I've gotten to visit the cemetery where they filmed the priest hanging himself, which is Midway, Georgia, and I think the other scenes in the interior of the cemetery for Bonaventure Cemetery, which is more north of Midway. I had a chance to go there too. But it was getting late in the day, and it just would have taken up a lot of the evening. But me and Sam went to Midway, and and the minute you could almost see where the camera was. And it's so amazing because when the priest is coming and the church is behind him and he's walking into the cemetery, it's amazing because when you're there in the reel, there's a main road between the church and the cemetery. And so I don't know how they got the traffic to stop, but you can see where the camera is. It almost makes the church and the cemetery look like the same piece of ground. But it's actually from the cemetery, it's a drop off. And then there's the road, the main road, and then the church is off across the street. But somehow, the way things are, you can just camera trick, make it look like it's just one ground. But yeah, visiting the cemetery, and I think we pretty much nailed down to the tree where he hangs himself is still there. Surprisingly, after all these years. I mean, the practical. I think one of the greatest. Posters. One of I freaking love. I know it's City of the Living Dead, but for me as a kid growing up, it's the Gates of Hell. I mean, I'm trying to think. Lovecraft. This probably is rooted a lot in The Evil Clergyman by H.P. Lovecraft, which is a short, very short story, but terrifying. And you can see in Lovecraft's description of the evil clergyman is the description of the priest who hangs himself. And it is amazing. I'm trying to think of a scene we haven't really talked about in here. I love the nightmare logic of it. I love how everything is sort of like interconnected but broken, fractured. Like the entire film is like this fractured layer of nightmare sequences. I love the scene, the seance at the beginning. I love the is it Christopher George? And isn't that it? Christopher George. That's what I'm thinking of, right? Christopher George. When he's when he's in the cemetery and he thinks he hears the faint screaming, but can't quite get it, and he starts to walk towards. Then he turns back. Then he starts to walk towards. Then he turns, and then he's kind of like, "What am I?" And then suddenly, in that moment, he hears it, and he goes over and he realizes it, and the horror on his face, and he gets a pickaxe and nearly puts it right through her head. It's got to be one of but just the interior shot of the coffin when she first wakes up, too, and she starts to realize the gravity of the situation, like she is awake in a coffin, is absolutely horrifying. When the guy's messing with the bodies, when he takes the trinket. And then when that old lady bites him,
oh yeah,
it's got to be the most gnarliest off-screen moments because you don't have to see it, you hear it, and and he shirks back in terror after and you could just imagine what that could have looked like had they been able to film it the right way. But it was good enough. It was good enough not seeing it, just hearing it. And then when that lady's in that house running, moving all up around in the upstairs, and they can hear her. Then eventually they just find her, her laid body. There's so much. I mean, the guys in the bar, Bob. I mean, his whole character of just being the outcast of this town, and yet he seems to realize that something really wrong is beginning to happen. And I love Giovanni Radici there, Lombardo Radici. Gotta love. I don't know what my favorite character of his is, whether it's the last House on the Edge of the Park or Stage Fright. Absolutely love his character in Stage Fright, and we lost him way too early. Way too early. I love his character in this movie. The drill press scene. The girl vomiting up her guts, man. That might have been the scene as a kid watching it on VHS that I think my mouth just hit the floor and I was just staring at this, like, with the VHS quality back in the day, it wasn't as, the fake mouth and everything wasn't as pronounced.
Yeah.
And that might be one effect that, doesn't, it's, you can see it more, as the transfers get better and better and better, unlike the drill pressing. But that is a terrifying, man, when that priest, man, and that's the evil clergyman, when he just freaking stares and, man, it all just starts. And that poor, what's that? What's his name there? And the boyfriend, director of Cemetery Man.
Oh,
Yeah. That's great. A couple of the grabbing the back of the head and just yanking out the skull plate and the brains matter, and the whole race against time before all the way to the underground cavern, or the underneath the cemetery when you've got dead bodies hanging from the ceiling, and just that whole I don't know, just so much packed into that movie. And it's so funny because a lot more times than not, when you hear people reviewing that movie or podcasting the movie, it's the weakest one of the three. And for me, it's the strongest one of the three. I mean, and maybe it's just you got to be hardwired for that aesthetic, or that, I guess, the nightmare logic of it. And the idea, because Lovecraft said, it is images outweigh the narrative, or the plot. And that movie is a series of images that tell a story, and that is pure cinema. That's film.
Yeah.
If you don't get it, you don't get it. I mean, and whether how it accidentally came together at the end, I love the end. I just freaking absolutely love it when the kid's just running towards them and you're not really sure exactly what it is they're reacting to, but they're reacting to something horrifying. And I don't know, man, and just frizzy. I think the trilogy Zombie, I think it's a great moment. It's got to be one of the greatest moments in a director's life when he's surrounded by the people that he's surrounded by, not just Sacchetti, but his editor, Tomasi, who he had on several films, both Gino De Rossi's, of course, Abalti, cinematographer. To have that many people around you for a stretch of time, as short-lived as it was, is, I don't know, man. It's amazing. And it's really too bad. I think, like Sacchetti says, it's really too bad they didn't have a producer who cared more. Because those two could have really, I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe Italian cinema moves forward more. I don't know. Instead of, petering out towards the late 80s. But I don't know. I've seen The Cemetery. I've seen it I have not seen it on the big screen. I almost said I've seen it on the big screen. I wish I have. This is the one I need to see. This is one. I've seen some of my favorite movies on the big screen, at least some of them. The Thing, mainly on the big screen. But I don't know if I'll rest comfortably in death if I don't see Gates of Hell on the big screen at least once in my life. I so badly gotta see this. That would be, and if it was in a remastered 4K, it would be so awesome. But I think this was a great top 5.
I do too.
It was a nice slice of, hopefully, anyone who stays with all the way to the end gets who may not know Fulci as well. Maybe a little surprised by the movies, and there's so much more. I mean, the guy directed over, like, how many decades? Like 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, almost 5 decades.
Yeah.
In the 90s, yeah, because I think he died in 96. So, and he covered just about everything from the comedies, the musical, uh, you know, the more sex romp type thing, to the giallis, into the westerns, the
Conquest.
yeah, oh yeah. That is a fun movie, and a lot of the Black Cat, um, Manhattan Baby, um, and then on into of course post Ripper. Um, um, I've got okay. So Glenn, how many Fulci movies do you have in your collection?
5, 6, 7. I don't know, probably maybe about 10, I think.
And Lonnie?
I think I got maybe probably like about 9. I really need to beef up my collection.
I'm currently at 14, but Lonnie, you'll pass me soon. You've got
Well, I
so
got
many movies. I wish. I mean, there's some. I wish. I mean, like Murder Rock. I'd love to, get that. What was that? What was that one? Um, what's that one? Is it Demona or something like
Pneumonia.
Demonia? Yeah, Demonia. Um, yeah, a couple of the made-for-TV ones he did at the very, very, very end stretch. And then even going, I would, Benedito Sensi, I think, is one movie that he really loved, going way back. Um, yeah, what a filmography! What a guy! Just and he left us way too early. It's too bad too because him and Dario were that close to doing the wax mask together.
That would have
And
been me.
that would have been the first collaboration of two who spent too much of their careers rivaling and hating on one another. And maybe Sacchetti could have been part of that binding glue between the two too. Since Sacchetti,
Yeah.
it would have been great if they had a really nice reconciliation of a lot of them, and they could have. Oh man, it's just. And I was reading a little bit about Fulci, and it just some think he just let himself go. It could have been maybe treated, and he just for whatever reason just let it. I think he had to do a type of diabetes, and I think he wasn't taking his medication or something, and just sort of let himself go. Which is, if that's the case, is really really tragic, really sad. Of course, Lovecraft left way too early too because he had cancer. And the idiot never went to go get it checked out because he was the kind of person who just didn't want to go to the doctors. And when he did finally go, because the pain was unmanageable, he basically you got 3 months and you're gone. And that's sad.
Yeah.
That is sad. But anyways, final thoughts on Lucio Fulci?
Just I'm looking forward to trying to get more of his movies, and I'm hoping we'll get more releases. I'm hoping like some of the like Conquest might get a 4K. I hope, and stuff like like some of his comedies, like Perversion Story and you know um, you know Manhattan Baby. Like I'm really really hoping that, like I've said it before, I'll answer that. I'm really really hoping that Arrow will do, with zombie, like what they did with City of the Living Dead. I'm really, really hoping we can get something like that. But just, just I really do. I do want to get more of his movies. I want to check more of them out. So,
The more
yeah,
Fulci you have in your life, the better it is.
yeah.
Yeah. And you're right, Glenn. There's something about his. He does have a style. It's hard to express it.
Yeah.
But I think
But you
it's.
know it when you see it.
I think it's helped by who surrounded him.
Probably, yeah.
Brizzy, and who those who were close enough, who helped him express himself in ways that would have been impossible without those people. At least in the way he did it. Right.
Yeah.
At such a low budget, and I mean, what he did what he did in Zombie and those next three, with what money he had compared to what Argento did. I mean, could you imagine if Fulci would have had those resources?
Oh, wow, yeah.
I mean, maybe it's better he didn't. I mean, because they proved you could create insane stuff with less, and Zombie is a perfect example of that. I mean, that is a freaking gore fest movie, man. Gotta freaking love it. All right. It's a good top five.
I'm sorry, I got to get going. My battery power is dying.
All right, guys, we're going to close out this episode then. Lucio Fulci, hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to the next time we get together.
Thank you guys for doing this video with me.